This video is going to cover the spawn selection update that is part of the Terminal and MorphUI products. So just to be clear, you must own both the Terminal system and MorphUI for this to work. And it works just automatically. There's no updates you need to make or changes you need to make, except to the individual systems themselves. But once you have those two systems working independently, the spawn selection will just work right away. But there are some things that you might want to play around with, and we will get to that in just a moment. But if you want to disable the spawn selection for whatever reason, and replicated storage, come down to Lattice Common, open up the spawn selection module, and just change this enabled value here to false. And if you change that to false, the two systems will no longer be connected to each other, and they will just act as if they never knew of each other's existence. So we did some editing to the terminals themselves. So we need to add the spawns around the terminal. So now within our terminal models, we have a folder that contains all of our spawns. And these are just normal spawn locations. And you just want to make sure that they're facing the right direction. So if you highlight all of those and right click and then click Show Orientation Indicator, we'll see that right now they're all facing different directions. Now, we probably want our players to be spawned outwards so they're not facing the terminal when they spawn. And of course, these could be placed anywhere, right? So if we want a spawn that's maybe over here, but still attached to this point, we can do that. So feel free to rotate those and position them wherever you want. There's no problem there. As well, we have this invisible part called camera. So when the morph selection UI transitions into the spawn selection screen, your camera will be positioned right where this part is. So you want to make sure that this part is in your world in a place that, works nicely for this capture point. And then we can go ahead and hide it when we no longer need it. So just before we go into the system, I show you how it works a little bit. Two more things I want to mention is we have what I call locked terminals, which means they're always locked to a team. And we also have neutral terminals, which are always open to neutral teams, like civilians, for example. So over here, we have an example of a locked terminal. So I've named this one Lattice Army. The name doesn't matter, but that's what it shows up like in the UI. And so we add a string attribute called locked team. And then you have to make sure that this attribute name here is the exact same name as the team group you want to spawn there. So if I go into my terminal system settings on the server, so I have two team groups. One is Raiders and the other is Lattice Army. So the Lattice Army capture point locked team attribute is exactly the same name as my Lattice Army team group. So anyone who's part of that Lattice Army team group can now spawn at this terminal no matter what. It cannot be captured by any other team. It's always available to that team. Likewise, over here we have one for the Raiders. So locked team is set to Raiders. Now for the civilians, if we come back to our terminal system settings, we have these two new settings here, neutral teams and neutral icon. So the neutral teams are all the teams that, they're not good guys, bad guys, are just in the game, like civilians. And you can add as many teams as you want here. And the neutral icon is like the image that represents those teams that will be shown on the spawn selection UI. And they get this spawn here. I've named it civilian. And we set a Boolean attribute called neutral, and we make sure it's checked. And then that spawn will always be available to our civilians. So I'll just kind of go through the system in a quick playthrough here to talk about some stuff. So if we choose civilian, The only spawn we have right now is this one civilian spawn that we've added. So if I click any other spawns, nothing happens. We can only spawn at the civilian spawn. If I go to Lettuce Army and just choose a random morph here, so I can now only spawn at the Lettuce Army spawn. And if I do some magic trickery to make it so I own one of the other spawns real quick. So now we've captured spawn A, technically. So now when I click spawn A, I can now preview spawn A. And now I can't actually spawn there because I did some kind of hacky things and the server would kick me out. So if I guess this proves that exploiters can't spawn at whatever spawn they want to, and there's some security in there. But as you can see, you can only preview spawns that you own. And if we lost access to this spawn while I was viewing it, my screen would go black and it'd go back to my Lettuce Army spawn. And so the spawns that are locked to your team will always appear on the left-hand side, and the spawns that you definitely can't use are always on the right-hand side. So, for example, Lettuce Army can never use Raiders, but we know it's an option. But yeah, we just can't use it. So that's it for this video. If you have any questions, hop on over to our Discord server, and we will help you there.